Here we go. Let's talk about that. We read from this. What is time? Okay. So yeah, time. What is time? All right. What is religion? What is economics? What is anything that you might be studying? Okay, in the here at Gwynedd Mercy, nursing, education. You know what it is. I would assume because you signed up for it. It's your major, maybe. Okay, so I'm assuming, but if someone asks you to define what it is, that usually takes some thought. I would imagine. I would, hmm, I would imagine it takes some thought, and something as simple as time. What time is my class meeting? You use the word. You instinctively, intuitively know what it means, yes? Because you show up, or you don't, but hopefully you show up. You know you're supposed to show. It knows it means that you're supposed to be there at a certain. If there's a time for the course that it's going to be held. But what is it? Define it for me. Then it gets harder. And it's also, isn't it also just a word that we made up? It's different in, other languages. Time is the English word. Okay, but in other languages it's a different word. It seems to be the same concept, but it seems to be the same concept, right? Maybe. I mean, I'm sure there's some anthropologist who could show up and say, well, this tribe in the deep Amazon, that we discovered really doesn't have a concept of time. All right, I'm not going to. I'm sure there are exceptions that prove the rule, but I would imagine that most human cultures, no matter what words you're using, the idea, right? You understand it. You know, you might speak Chinese, but at a Chinese university, you know what time your classes are. People know to show up, that the class is going to be held. Speak English here mostly, people know what it means. It's not a mystery. I think the same thing with religion. Just because it's a word that we use, yes, someone took the word, okay? I think it has meaning. It's identifying a concept that people really do perceive and understand. Maybe they can't define it, okay? But they know it's there in some sense. It affects them. And so, yeah, I am going to. I think I will. I will argue, contrary to others, that yeah, there is. We are studying something that does really exist in some way, at least conceptually. But I think also actively, because look, showed you a video of people doing stuff that seems to. We would say, oh, that's religious. It's not political in any way. We think, or it's not. Not baking soda bread or something, making a pizza. It's not culinary. It's religious. If you had your options, right? If I gave you options of what do you think this is, I think that most of you would say, yeah, it looks religious in some. Why? How? How do you know? How do you know? Because sometimes in religious rites, food is part of the food is part of it, isn't it? Some religions. Sacrificing an animal, you cook it up and you eat it. Or you bake bread, have a glass of wine. Yeah. So food is part of some religions. Eating things and having a meal. All right. So I think definitions are good. I think there is a thing called religion. I think trying to define it is not necessarily hopeless. It is hard, I think. And you have to, I guess, keep any definition of it provisional. All right, but I think we have enough evidence from human history and sociology and stuff like that to have an idea of what makes up something religious and not, say, athletic or political. Okay, so this is a problem that people have had for a long time. As I show you this, that's why I have this quote, famous quote from Augustine of Hippo. If no one asks me what time is, I know I use the word, I understand the concept. But if you ask me specifically, no, but what is it? Define it for me. You know, then I stop. I become silent. But does that mean that there's no such thing as time or it's indefinable? I don't think so. Definitions are helpful things. They're tools, like any tool. All right. Yeah, I have to be aware that I'm creating it. It's coming out of my mind. Yes. Okay. And okay, I guess you could say I'm part of the Western Academy because I'm teaching at an American university and et cetera and so forth. I'm not teaching in India, okay, or South America. So I'm part of the Western, I have a Western mindset. Whatever. Okay, fine. That's part of who I am. So I recognize these things, but I still think that they can help us. They help us to understand. They provide boundaries. Definio, the word definition, definio, to set a boundary. It sets boundaries. It doesn't mean there couldn't still be other things outside the boundary, okay? There are always exceptions that prove the rule, I would imagine. Well, I know. But that doesn't mean that no boundary or limit can't be set, or that the limit, even the limit that's set, is simply arbitrary. Okay? If it's simply arbitrary, then you could just say, well, this word or whatever concept means whatever I want it to mean. Then it's not even a definition because you haven't really set a boundary. It's totally arbitrary. It's what you want it to be. Okay? There's a reason why this word or this idea means this and not that. You've thought about, you've noticed things about it that make it what it is, okay? Yeah, finis is a boundary. It's just a Latin word for a boundary. So to set a boundary, definio, the verb. And as I said, definitions are tools. It's a tool. It's not the end-all and be-all. It's something that we use, especially with our intellects, our minds, to bring order to our behavior, to bring order to how we speak and how we think. All right, so definitions bring order, and that's what we're looking for. Okay, what things we want to see, what things are consistent with this word that we recognize as religion, whatever word we want to give it. Okay, I'm going to use religion. You could say spirituality or supernaturality or whatever. Okay, as other words, but we want to see what's consistent with this idea, but it has to be consistent with the idea. Otherwise, it doesn't. You're right. Religion could be anything you want it to be, and the religious studies people are correct. There is no such thing. All right, fine. Well, then, I don't know. Turn in your diploma. I don't know. You got your PhD in religious studies. Well, you don't know what you're studying, so mail back the diploma. It could be diploma in anything you want it to be. And we want clarity. And we want to be clear about what it is so we can distinguish it from something else. We can notice religion from politics. Okay? Something is political and not religious. Because religion, politics will glom onto religious stuff. And vice versa. Sometimes the two get intertwined. Okay? And religious imagery will be used politically and stuff like that. I'm just hold on. I'm just thinking of an idea if I can use it as an example. I'm not sure how I can use that as an example. Maybe it'll come back to me. Maybe I'll be able to slip it in later. But anyways, I think you get the point. Okay. So even though we can't know necessarily, oh wait, one second. We know we can't always easily know or explain what we know about anything, religion included. Doesn't mean it's not possible. That's my argument, that it's not possible, that we should just basically give up. Everyone kind of make up his own mind and then write books on it about what you think it is, or teach courses on it about what you think it is. No, I want to define up front what I think religion is, so when we start talking about world religions, why I chose these things when I'm talking about like Hinduism, Buddhism, and not say, Marxism or deconstructionism or something else, and saying, well, that fits. It's a world religion. Wait a second, Dr. Dunn, you're talking about, political philosophies or economics, free market stuff. Yeah, but it's religious, right? Because that's how I define it. It has religious qualities according to my definition. Why have I why are these things considered religious? The only way, not just because I chose them because they're in the textbook. Why are they in your textbook for the course? All right. Being able to define it, I can explain it and justify it. Okay. Yeah, I know it's boring, but I'm trying to lay the foundation just to understand how do you know these things, or why are you choosing, why are you choosing one thing and talking about it, but not talking about another? See what I'm saying? Okay. So I'd say that religion definitions are good things. It's not purposeless to try to figure out what we're talking about. It gives us clarity. Okay, when we actually do encounter things that seem to be religious, we know why we think they're religious. But also, my argument is that religion exists. I do think it actually exists. There is a thing that we can call religion or spirituality or whatever. But I do think it is identifiable in human experience. It's a part of human experience. Many human cultures, in fact, I would say most human cultures, you could also say all human cultures, but again, I don't know. I'm not an anthropologist, but I haven't come across any anthropological literature where they found a purely religious-less culture yet. So it seems to be pervasive throughout all human cultures. But I'll say many. Many human cultures, even if they don't have a word for it, and some cultures don't. They don't know what to call what they're doing. Okay? But they're worshiping spirits or the ancestors, or, using little magical amulets or something when they go out hunting to make sure they have a good hunt. They may not know a word for that practice or concept, but they just know they have to do it, because if they might catch 3 rabbits rather than no rabbits, right? And that's what they want. They need to eat. They might have a good catch of fish rather than no catch of fish. Okay, so even if there's no word for or no name for it necessarily in a culture, or they haven't thought about it, we might say deeply, as some other cultures seem to have, I would say that there are certain human ideas and activities that have a resemblance. They resemble each other so much that they're something. You know what I'm saying? At least I think we can say that. They share a family resemblance. There are similarities that can overlap. They keep recurring. People keep doing the same thing or thinking the same thing. What is this making you? Is this freaking you out? Or think like politics. I was on Wikipedia the other day. Forget why. What was I looking? Oh yeah, they had elections in the Central African Republic. And somehow that led me to a map of political systems of the world. Unitary presidential systems, totalitarian regimes, theocracies, monarchies, constitutional monarchies, all sorts of, the map on Wikipedia, all the countries were color-coded according to the different political system they had. Yeah. Very different, stuff, all over the place. And yet, you would say this is all politics. These are all political systems. From things from purely democratic systems to totalitarian regimes where there's no voting at all, no other political parties. It's just, the big man rules. Usually the big man. I don't know of any totalitarian regimes where it's a woman. Sorry. I imagine it will happen sometime. But and yet they're both political systems, democracy versus totalitarianism. And yet, and so, but they're so different. They're so different in their view of society and how it should be organized. And yet, they're both political systems, even though they're very different. But there are commonalities. There are enough commonalities that you can say, all right, I can tell this is a political system and not something else. We're talking politics here. The same thing with economics, different economic systems. Free markets, laissez-faire, state control, blah, blah. Very different views of, how to generate money, how to generate stuff. Already lost. Yeah. And yet, we all recognize with their differences, it's the commonalities which help us define, yeah? I think. mostly. So most human cultures recognize some kind of transcendence, and that's just a word I'm going to focus on, transcendence. I think it's on the next slide, but I don't want to. I hope it is. Religion exists. Yeah. I mean, just look at it. You can just look at it and recognize that it's, even if you have no clue. I mean, if you're a Christian or a Catholic, you might be familiar with this kind of symbolism, the pointy hat of a bishop, okay, laying hands on somebody. All right. So you might, okay, yeah, I know that from my own experience. Okay. But some of these other things, like, two dudes with fire in front of some statue, Ganesh, it's little, we'll learn about Ganesh later. Little child with an elephant head. I'll tell you how he got an elephant head. Kind of an interesting story. But nevertheless, you've most of you, maybe all of you, have never seen the ceremony like this. Maybe you've seen something like this. I would imagine you've never seen this. This is from the Shinto religion, which is the national religion of Japan. Okay. You see dudes dressed up like this. They're walking through a hoop of grass, etc., and so forth. You may have never seen it in your life, encountered it, but somehow you're like, if I had to choose, probably is some religious thing, some spiritual thing they're doing. Transcendence. What makes it religious? Probably that it's transcendent. Whatever this culture recognizes, or these people recognize, that there is some, often invisible, but not always. Not always. Sometimes, usually, these are invisible realities. But there's some reality or principle or force in the cosmos that has a control over it, over humans, over the universe itself, and maybe sometimes interacts with humans. But it transcends kind of like the normal world. It's abnormal. It's not part of the normal world per se, although it can, as I say, interject itself and interact with the normal world. So transcendence, from standing or climbing, scando in Latin means to climb, to ascend. So in other words, kind of like stepping over something, transcending. You're stepping over something. If there were something here, there ain't nothing here. But if I had, well, I guess I make it real for you. Coffee. All right, I'm transcending my coffee carafe. Okay, scando, I stepped over it, or I'm standing trans over it. Okay, if any of you travel, if any of you have traveled, does anyone travel to Europe or? Yeah. So you took I'm assuming it would be Italy. So you had to take a transatlantic flight. Did you go straight to Italy or stop off?
Yeah, Bruce.
Straight over. Oh, that's a long flight. I once traveled to Papua New Guinea. That was like a day. That was a day. I'd first have a transnational flight, Mr. Frank, from New Jersey, where I was, to LA, California. And then from LA, go trans-Pacific flight all the way over to the other side of the world to Australia, and then up to Papua New Guinea. And it took it 24 hours. It wasn't as bad as it sounds. If you think that's bad, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And I was able to sleep through a lot of it. It wasn't terrible. I watched a few movies. I tried watching one of the John Wick movies, but I found it was a little too violent. And I thought, I never saw that movie, Fight Club. You ever see Fight Club? Brad Pitt. What's the other guy? Started watching Fight Club because I never seen it, and I thought, all right, it's not something I really want, but I was interested. I want to see what was all the chatter about. Like 15 minutes into it, there's some big nude scene. Oh man. All right, I'm 53 years old, so okay, I'm not. I'm not a prude, okay? I mean, I'm a Catholic. I'm not looking for nude scenes intentionally. But, I knew right next to me in the other seat were these little kids. And here I am sitting there watching some lady rolling around butt naked, having sex. Turn it off. I can watch it some other time, I guess. Well, I never stopped and started watching it. It didn't really actually interest me that much. So I can live without it. But yeah, I mean, you're in close quarters on a plane, and you got to think sometimes about who's next to you. You know, that's a little kid, and you're watching, I don't know, something like that. Or you're watching some horror film, there's some gory horror film, and you're freaking the kid out. So, am I my brother's keeper? Yes, I am. I try to be my brother and my sister's keeper. I don't want to freak out somebody else's kid, give them nightmares. Anyways, transcendence. Okay, so there's some transcendent reality, something, a fancy way of just saying there's something beyond this world. Okay, that sometimes gets into the world, interacts with it. And every culture seems to recognize this. Okay? They just have a lot of different words for it. So, for example, I'll start with the ancient Greeks. Okay? In ancient Greek culture, because it's very old culture and been around for a while, one of the sources of philosophy for human history. Not that there weren't philosophers in other cultures as well, like India, but Greece is usually ascribed to be like the origin of real philosophizing, I think. Anyone know Doctors Messina or Cluis? You took a class with the. What'd you take with them?
I took two different ones. I can't remember.
Two different ones you can't remember.
Yep. 3 years ago.
Oh, okay. But anyways, they might contradict me. I think they would back me up. I did philosophy as an undergrad. That was my major, Mr. Frank. Because I wanted to be a priest, and to enter in for the application for the seminary, they wanted you to major in philosophy. Yeah, that was a good idea. That opened a lot of job doors for me. Oh, you have a bachelor's in philosophy. Yes, I can do a lot of things for you. If you want me to think about a lot of things and talk, I'm your man. No, but Matthew, do you know how to code? No. Anyways, yeah, the ancient Greeks talked about theos, which they called the divine. And a lot of these words keep coming back to the idea of gods. But not every religion has gods per se. They're more spirits and stuff like that. Or a force, something, maybe it's non-personal, a non-personal force that they believe in. They wouldn't call it a god necessarily. But nevertheless, this idea of some kind of like superhuman, very powerful, spiritual, usually spiritual, but even the gods can have bodies like humans too in some religions, being, okay? Usually the idea of God is associated with power and force. Something powerful. So theos, the divine. So the Greeks talked about the divine, the things related to the gods, what was connected to the divinities. Anything that was connected to the gods or the goddesses was religious. Okay? Whoop. Don't do that. I know, is this a touch? I didn't really touch nothing. All right, fine. There we go. There we go. And they had this further word, threskeia, another word, threskeia, which meant worship, as you can see, worship or devotion to the gods, the worship and the honor that you were supposed to show to the gods, simply because they were gods and they existed. No one really thought, a couple of things to know about religion for a lot of ancient cultures. Well, not even ancient cultures, up until modern times, and even for some cultures today, is that they had these words, but they didn't make the distinction, the mental distinction, or even the actual active distinction between them. The gods existed as really as anybody else, members of your family. Okay? There was no difference between, there was no secularism like we have it now, where you have this distinction or even a separation between religion and politics or society. That wasn't in their mindset. They didn't think of it that way. They didn't kind of like distinguish religion from anything else. Okay, it was everything. The gods were just part of the reality. And so just like you had political duties or duties to your family or whatever, you had duties to the gods. You had to worship the gods because they existed, and because if you didn't, they would hurt you. They didn't want them to hurt you, cause some natural disaster, give you shingles or something, give you some disease, kill off your children in childbirth or something. So you wanted to make the gods like you, or at least not hurt you. Because they just were. And people didn't think about, or the philosophers did. Most people just accepted they existed and that they were not them. They were not gods. So worship and devotion, threskeia, that you gave to the divinities. All right. If we go to another very ancient culture, just thought a lot about religion. I mean, a lot of religious ideas and questions. The Indians were all over it centuries, even maybe 1,000 years before Westerners. But we have India, the subcontinent of India, where they talk about Dharma. Dharma is the word, which is a very broad term. Dharma can encapsulate or incorporate a lot of different ideas. Morality. Okay, well, before I get on to that, let me go into the etymology of the word. What does it mean? Well, I mean, I'll talk about this a little bit later when we talk about Hinduism. I'll talk about the Indo-Aryans, the sub-Aryans. But I don't mean Nazis, so don't go nuts so long. The Aryans are not Nazis. The Nazis thought they were Aryans, but they were wrong. But anyways, it's about language, okay? You have language families, okay? There are groups of language families. They seem to come from a common ancestor, and then they differentiate and branch out. Okay, so English comes from German. German comes from the German branch of Proto-Indo, what's called Proto-Indo-European, family of languages which extends from north of India all the way over to Europe as Indo-European. You have other languages. I know that Semitic, Hebrew, Arabic, Niger, Congo, the African. Okay, so there are different language families. Tibetan, Tibetan language and Chinese. Anyways, whatever. So there are relationships. So the word dharma, believe it or not, is a cousin of the Latin word firmus. It's kind of similar, but not exactly. Dharma became firmus in Old Latin. And firm in English, which we have from Latin, we say firm, okay? Or hard, if you want to use the Germanic word, because we have both in our language history. We have a lot of Latin words based off of Latin and French and stuff like that. And a lot of our native vocabulary of German, so we can say firm or hard, dharma. But it's like a foundation. If you want a firm, why is the foundation important? It's firm. It's hard. Okay, you don't want a soft foundation to build a building on. You want to drill for rock. Put the piles in rock. Right. You don't want to put them in sand because then the building will move around and sink. So it's supportive. That dharma has this this original idea of supporting dharma, something that supports something, like a foundation. In this case, dharma means what is the foundation of the whole cosmos, of reality itself, what undergirds all reality, which includes the gods as well as humans. Okay, dharma. The gods have a dharma too, just as I as a human have a dharma. Okay, and so it's applied in a very broad way to kind of similar ideas as well, the foundation of your life, or whatever. So morality, ethics, virtue, duty, obligations. Okay, that's a big one. Your obligations, you have a dharma that you simply have to follow. Your dharma right now is to be a student. That's not just because you are students, but for the Indian perspective, there are 4 stages of life, and when you're in the stage of student right now, and after that you would become a householder. I know it's very male centered, but whatever. If you're a man, you get a wife, you start raising children, hopefully sons. If you're a woman, you get married and start having sons for your husband. And then there are other stages after that. But in the student stage, you study the religious texts. That's your dharma. That's all you do. That's all you're committed to. And if you don't perform your dharma, it will affect your karma. I'm just saying, I don't try to do it, but the poetry just kind of comes out sometimes. Yeah, karma. The state of your future existence. Okay? In the next life. Hopefully not the next life. You want to kind of leave the cycle of death and rebirth. But if you, as many people do, have to die and be reborn, you want to go up to a higher plane of existence, not to a lower one. But if you, don't follow your dharma or perform your dharma improperly, you'll build up bad karma. You could say, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, I have a word I could use, but I can't use it because it would be too confusing. Karma means activity. You build up baggage, I guess is the best way to put it. You build up bad baggage, which will bring you down. So dharma is perceived as your duties of life or in the community. And your duties include your relationship with the gods, the divinities. Again, we get back to this idea of gods. But included in this is not just gods who are hopefully good gods, but even bad gods that we call demons or devils. You have to honor the devils as well as the gods, the good gods as well as the bad ones. Because, of course, the bad ones are more likely to harm you, to do something bad. So you still have to worship and honor them as well. So dharma includes that. Again, that idea of threskeia from Greece. And then there are spirits. Hinduism has all sorts of spirits and lesser, you could say kind of semi-gods or demigods and stuff like that. Very big on the right performance of ritual, because ritual is very big in Hinduism, and performing it properly is because it imitates the, the machinations or the movements of the cosmos itself. It's kind of like the whole universe embodied in the ritual, okay? So you might think, well, it's just a bunch of people sitting around a fire, throwing flowers into it, while someone is on the side chanting from a book and stuff like that. Who cares, or maybe not who cares, but okay, that's just what it is. For a Hindu, that's not what it is. You're directly plugging into the universe through the religious ritual. And if you perform it wrongly, you sing the song wrong, you perform the ritual, you do the ritual, God bless you, sir, I'm right there with you. You do it in the wrong way or the wrong sequence. You go to number 1, and then you go to number 3, and you forgot to do 2, so you go back and do 2. Well, I did all of them, but you didn't do them in the right order. Does that matter? Oh, it doesn't matter. Oh, yes, it does. You've disrupted the Dharma. And what repercussions can that have? Oh, I don't know, disease, natural disasters. You lose your children in childbirth. Your cattle die. Yeah. You've disrupted the universe. So Dharma also applies to ritual and actual worship, which has to be done properly. All right. Move a little to the east, into Eastern Asian cultures, like China, Japan, Korea, areas of the world. They talk about the Tao or the Tao. When I grew up, it was Tao with a T, all right, which in the Wade-Giles, it really should be pronounced Tao according to the Wade-Giles system. I didn't know that. But so, okay, Tao. So now they just write it with a D. All right, Tao, because that's how it should be pronounced, even though if it were meant to be a hard T in the Wade-Giles system, they'd have a not a comma, what you would call it? My mind is getting locked up today. An exclamation, not a parenthesis. Apostrophe. Well, I'm getting old. I gotta get, what is it, Prevagen? Get that Prevagen stuff they advertise, Although it's not FDA approved, but maybe it'll help. I don't know. We'll see. Anyways, an apostrophe, that means it's a hard T, Tao, but it's not an apostrophe. So it should have been pronounced Tao. But I didn't know that. Nobody knew that, so we all said Tao. So I'm still going to probably say Tao. So shoot me, all right? But I'll try to say Taoism. All right, Tao. Also, again, used in a lot of ways, okay? I mean, basically, the word simply means like a road or a pathway, okay? Yeah, path or road. All right, that's basically what it is, all right? A road that you follow, the way that you're supposed to follow, all right? But in a broader sense, a more conceptualized sense, it does mean principle, the teaching, the guide, okay? And basically, Tao is, well, really, simply as put, it's just how things are. A lot of times you'll hear it described in terms of nature. Taoism is supposed to be all about living in harmony with nature. Okay, which is true. The Taoists, do that. They also do a lot of magic and stuff and try to control nature. But all right, fine, because I think we're big on harmony with nature, but. I don't know if the Taoists would describe it that way. It's just the way things are. That's why you have to live according to it. It's not because they were primal environmentalists or something. It was like the Sarah Club before there was a Sarah Club. They were, the Taoists were just like, this is the way the world is. If you don't bend to it, you break. It'll break you. So you always are bending. You're always trying to be flexible to how the way the world is, however it might be going. Good or bad. It's the way. And it's how I'm supposed to behave. Part of existence, or part of the cosmos or the universe, I guess you could say, again, are gods and spirits. Good gods, good spirits, bad spirits. Other human beings. And so, Tao teaches you how to behave according to them and to others. So as I said, you're kind of moving with the way, the Tao of the universe. Think of if you're out there on not jet ski, but skiing, water skiing or something like that. All right? And trying to move according to the waves, or move according to the way the waves are, because the water, the waves of a lake or the ocean are always moving around. If you're, ever, when you sail boats, I don't, but, I watch YouTube. I don't know. I like to watch boats that are in storms, I don't know. Aircraft carriers caught in hurricanes. I don't know. It just interests me. I don't know. Anyways. But I mean, as a navigator, you got to know how you have to situate the boat according to the way the waves, because the waves are constantly shifting and changing and coming at you from different directions. You don't want to turn over. You got to follow the Tao, have a sense of where things are going. They're going up or down, right or left, and move with it. I mentioned the Shinto religion. Yes, Shinto, which is the national religion of Japan, where this is a combination of two Chinese words. A lot of Chinese has penetrated into these cultures. Yeah, Korea, Japan. Shen is another word for spirit in Japanese. If I remember correctly, cut from Japanese from Chinese, and this comes from Tao in Chinese, which they call To, and came To in Japanese. So the way of the spirits, Shin, their religion is following the way of the spirits, the ancestors, the spirits that inhabit the islands of Japan. As I said, it's their national religion, so you're worshiping the spirits of the islands of Japan. So it's the way of the spirits, the Shinto, the spirit way, you might say. Okay? If we go back to the West, we go to Rome, the Romans, the ancient Romans. Here we get the word that we're familiar with, religio, which we say religion. Dharma, what's that other one? There's a better word for it, though. I don't know. Don't remember. Anyways. Ancient Rome, they called it religio. And we're not exactly, religio is a mysterious word because we're not exactly sure what it means, where it comes from. There are different explanations for what words it's made up of. Ms. Cassiano. Yes. Ms. Cassiano? Good, I got it. Yes. Yes. Now, what I'm giving you is re ligo. Ligo ligare, which means ligare means to bind something. Okay? Tie it up. Yes? And re ligo means to bind together, to tie stuff up. Like a ligature, the word we have, ligature. Or link, you could also say. We have chain link fence. It's not really tied, but kind of in a way. All right? Things are linked together. Similar words that we have, which are related to this word ligo. Okay, so that which binds people together. And what binds you together? The gods and the spirits. The spirits that you worship in your family, starting with your family spirits. Your home has spirits and gods associated with it, usually with the fireplace and the door. Of course, your ancestors, previous family members who are dead. But not just the spirits of your actual family in your home, but of your town. They're protective of your town, okay, of your larger tribe that you belong to, your nation, your whole people, the gods of your people. So there are levels of spirits and gods again. So again, we see this coming back to this idea of these spiritually superhuman, powerful beings that just kind of exist and you have to kind of be devoted to so that they benefit you and don't hurt you, yes? So kind of the same idea going on here. Okay, but there are other readings of this word. I'm going with religo, but we have relego, which can mean to reread something, to read it again. And for the life of me, I've looked at stuff, I've thought about it myself. I don't know how you get the idea of religion from rereading. I just don't get it. I don't know, reading something over? Reading it again? What is that? There must be some, if it's true, if we could find out that actually is etymologically the source of the word religio and not religo, I would have to imagine there's some piece of information that we don't have that will make it make sense. But as it is, it's just one of the possibilities, but I don't know how it ties in. No pun intended with Lego municipality. And what's the third one? It's Lego, And then another one. I don't remember. It doesn't matter, obviously, because I don't remember. Or I'm just old. And I'm losing my mind. These human ideas, these are ideas, words that human beings have used and do use. Whatever the terminology, I would argue they describe something. There's something that exists. It doesn't matter whether you don't believe gods or spirits or fairies exist. It's not the point, okay? In reality, okay? But the term is describing something that people really think is existent, okay? It's not just a creation of modern scholars. People are all describing what seems to be a similar experience. Whether you believe, whether they're, misunderstanding natural events or occurrences and thinking they're gods or whatever, that's beside the point. That's another question. The source of why they think there are gods and spirits is another question. But they believe this, and then they apply this word to it. Okay, fine. This something. And then around this something, they develop all sorts of practices and ideas as people think about it and stuff like that to understand it and hopefully interact with it. As I said, to get it not to hurt you and to benefit you if you can. So maybe offer a sacrifice or something. You kill an animal and give it as food to the god so that the god will be happy and God will hear your prayer, whatever it might be. Or the god will, be appeased and won't hurt you, if you've done something wrong, I guess. And so there's a family resemblance. I think we already see this in the words. They all keep coming back to this idea of divinities and gods and goddesses and stuff. There are traits, and we call it religion. It's not music. It's not sports. Although these can be part of religion, but we know, because, as I mentioned, the Olympics, sports can be held for religious purposes. And music certainly is part of religion. People sing songs, play music all the time in religious music. So, not all of them are the same, as I mentioned with political systems, or even going into using my music analogy, maybe I'll switch over to that just for something different. All sorts of different types of music, and even subgenres within the genres of music. Heavy metal, then you have power metal, glam metal, pop metal, progressive metal, symphonic metal, black metal, dark metal, grunge metal, doom, sludge. And that's just heavy metal, if you're not into that, but country music, classical music, rap, hip hop, tons of all these little genres and subgenres, and even sometimes sub-subgenres. I remember I tried to get my students a while, maybe 10 years ago, there's this thing called crunk. Everybody get crunk. I didn't know what the heck crunk was. I'm like, what is crunk? Apparently it was like this subgenre of hip hop, I think. I didn't see any difference with hip hop, but whatever. Anyways. My students didn't seem to be into it, but I was listening to a song and the guys were saying, "Get crunk, everybody get crunk." I'm like, what's crunk? Oh, it's a type of hip hop. All right, fine. Not really my thing, I don't like country either. I grew up in the country. Anyways, yet with all these different types of music, and there are people who actually study music, musicology, the principles of music, how to write music, or what is music as sound, the production of sound energy, and stuff like that. And yet no one seems to have a problem with the word music, which is also a modern invention. It's also a modern invention of the modern academy, the study of music, musicology, and it started in the West as well. So what do we throw out? We say there's no such thing as music. We can't define what music is. We can't recognize music. because a bunch of white guys from Europe in the 1800s established the scientific study of music and the principles of music? No, I don't think so. I think the same thing with religion. The religions are different as the cultures are different. So they're not all the same. There are different genres of religion. Some religions look very much the same, and some religions are very different. They're not all looking for the same thing necessarily. They don't all have the same structure necessarily. They have some kind of resemblance amongst themselves, usually a belief in something transcendent over just the normal, you could say, natural world. Okay? I don't want to push that too much because not all religions have such a strong separation between, say, the natural and supernatural. They don't make that distinction. So I was telling you before with, in the ancient world, they had a word maybe that they meant, for the divinities or, the religio or theos or whatever, but they didn't think about, that the gods were somehow a separate thing from the world. They were much a part of the world as any human being was. They were just as normal, in a sense, you could say, as any human being was normal. It's just that they were different. They were on a higher level, a higher plane of existence. So, sometime in the 18th century, academics in Western European universities preferred to call these experiences, to categorize all these experiences of the transcendent that they saw amongst human cultures as religion. Okay, fine. But again, just because it was created as a category doesn't, in my opinion, make it useless, or doesn't mean that there wasn't something there that they were identifying, some commonality. What is religion?
Briefly, simply. Now, can we be briefly or simply? Hello!
Some Indian monks, Hindu monks. Are we still allowed? Can we not give the OK sign anymore still? Is that still, you're not allowed to do that? Is that still a racist symbol? Or is it okay now? Is it okay to say OK? Or am I a Klansman if I do this? Anyways, I don't know if they're giving the OK sign, or maybe just waving or something like that. Well, that guy looks like he's just waving. These guys, their hand symbol could be a hand symbol that means something more to them that I don't know. Okay, but many human cultures, as I said, recognize that there's some kind of superhuman reality of power and meaning, or that gives meaning, I should say, to their lives. It exists, it transcends humans, and yet somehow also exists amongst us in some ways, amongst humans. And this reality of power, meaningfulness is filled with other beings, gods and goddesses, demons, other places, things that's not part of the normal everyday world, okay? Just like our world has all sorts of different stuff in it, this other world too has different stuff, The gods have houses that they live in, just like we live in houses here, Gods and goddesses have all sorts of adventures. And so they fight amongst each other. They do all sorts of things, just like human beings, okay? But they're doing it on the level of their transcendent world. And sometimes it spills into the human world, which is not a good thing, because then humans get stepped on. All right. This transcendent reality has a meaning in religions, usually has a meaning that the normal world does not have, at least not fully. Okay? This reality, it's final reality. It's an ultimate reality. It's the end, in a sense. It's definitive of reality. It's kind of like the really real, if you want to put it that way. Whereas the world that we're living in as humans is real, but not as real. Not completely real. And in some cases, it's an illusion. It's just kind of like a false or an image of the real reality, which is beyond, which is ultimate, that only kind of like the gods exist in, or the spirits. And people want to connect up with that. They want to kind of tap into that really real world. So it's beyond it's beyond the normal or the ordinary world. And it has meaning, as I said, that the normal world doesn't have. And as I also said, it's sometimes this other reality, this ultimate reality, for whatever reason, interacts with or decides to interact with or interfere, one might say, or break into. But scholars love to use that phrase for some reason. The breaking in of God into human life, into the human world, normal world. It explains the world to people. This ultimate reality explains the world. Okay? It gives meaning to it. And it gives final fulfillment to human life. Tells you like what human life is supposed to be, where it's going, okay, where you're going to end up. All right. Whether you're going to come back after you end up there. And in some cases, it just ends. I mean, Hinduism, as I mentioned, the cycle of death and rebirth, you can come back to another existence, to another life. Okay, so it doesn't necessarily end. It's eternal. Okay, this cycle of death and rebirth, of creation and destruction, and then recreation. All right. In other religions, there is a destination you're going to. It's more linear. You go to heaven, but you have your human life. You die. You go to, say, heaven, in the Christian perspective or the Islamic perspective. Not all Jews believe in a heaven, but some do. But then you continue. You don't come back to the previous life. You continue living in this supernatural plane forever, usually. It just goes on forever. Okay. Some religions, you go nowhere. Like, say, the Scandinavian religions, the Viking religions, ancient Norway, Sweden and Denmark, and stuff like that. There's even the gods die in the Ragnarok, the great war, or the great destruction of the universe. Even some of the gods are killed. Okay, and gods never really die, even though they die. They don't, but they're not the same. They kind of go away, I guess. But yeah, I mean, you don't really go. Well, I shouldn't say that. The glorious, those who are brave and tough, especially in battle, they go to an eternal banquet, an eternal party, where you're eating, drinking, fooling around for the rest of eternity, or at least for a long, long time. Those who are cowards and stuff, you just go nowhere, So even but the point is, what makes them religious is because the religion knows what's going to happen, and then they tell you what's going to happen, and either how to avoid it or how to make it happen. I want to go to heaven, not hell, so I want to avoid hell. Go to heaven, or I want to be reborn at a higher level of existence. So the religion tells you this is what you need, this is what's going to happen. But if you do all of this, then you'll get what you want. Somehow the religion knows. So it provides ultimate fulfillment. And so, I call this ultimate reality. A power, a force, an order that people believe is in the universe and gives final and lasting meaning to the universe. This is ultimately what it's all about, right? Like Linus, Charlie Brown, the Christmas Charlie Brown episode. You see that where Linus gets up there, That's what it's all about. Would someone tell me what Christmas is all about? Lights, please. And then Linus tells the story of the gospel, the angels appearing to the shepherds. The Christ is born in Bethlehem. That's what Christmas is all about, Charlie Brown. Yeah. That's what the religion, that's what ultimate reality, this is what it's all about. Okay? Every religion seems to have an answer to this. Ulter in Latin means last. To go through the etymology, because I give it to you. It might appear up on a quiz, probably will. Ulter is Latin for last. The beyond, what lies beyond. Okay, interesting. Res, rei. I have to give you both forms because in Latin you have to learn sometimes both forms because the possessive case changes. So res becomes rei. But it means a thing, an object. That's all it means. So an ultimate object, ultimate thing, the ultimate thing, I guess you could say. There's nothing beyond it. And by beyond it, you say, well, wait, Mr. Dunn, didn't you say like in Hinduism you keep coming back eternally, right? Is that Miss Pinto in the corner? Miss Pinto? Miss Pinto? No. No, not Miss Pinto. Miss Voles? At the end, right? Miss Voles at the end. Is that Miss Pinto next to you? I thought because you had a big smile, maybe you were...
She's the other person.
Oh, there's no Miss Pinto here? Uh-oh. How do you know that? Yeah, but you're not in Christian faith. How would you know? And she told you? Ooh, I was going to say that was spooky, but no, it makes sense. All right. Anyways, what was I talking about? Ultimate. Oh, yeah. When I say nothing beyond, I don't mean that there can't be something else, right? Like I said, this Dr. Dunn, in Hinduism, don't you keep coming back and coming back and coming back? So what's really beyond if you keep coming back? No, what I mean is beyond in the sense that there's no reality different than that one, okay? If everything is cyclical forever, there's no other, that's exactly how it is. There's nothing beyond that reality, okay? Even if reality, in a sense, like if you understand me, Mr. Lodis, kind of keeps repeating itself, right? But that's how it's always going to be. It's never going to change, okay? If there is a heaven, then there's a heaven. There's, and you get there, and you're in the presence of the God forever, then you're not leaving there. There's no beyond. It's the ultimate. You've arrived. Okay? That's what I mean by saying, yeah, I just want to clarify that because I don't want you to think like, when I say beyond or it's ultimate in that sense, that it's not confusing in that you might not be confused. So it's ultimate in the sense that it's the only explanation of how the cosmos is. Okay? Even in religions that are very pluralistic in their viewpoint. Again, like Hinduism. Hinduism can absorb a lot of different ideas within Hinduism. In fact, scholars would say there really isn't one religion called Hinduism. There are several versions of Indian religions that, again, share commonalities. But they all kind of agree, like, this is how it is. They share certain views of how reality is, and it's not any different, even if they have very pluralistic ideas about which gods you worship or which sacred writings you read and follow. They agree on certain essential things like this, the basic things of this is how the world, ultimate reality really is, in their case, cyclical. Life, death, and rebirth, reincarnation, and all that. And it's real. I mean, by being real, it gives meaning. It's what gives meaning to the normal world, I guess you could say, everything else. It gives meaning to everything, I guess, under its influence, from the highest form of being, the gods, to the lowest, like an atom or something. Not that an atom is necessarily a low form of existence, but yeah, so even the gods are part of this ultimate reality. They don't sit perched over it, okay? They're part of it too, as I mentioned, that gods have a dharma as well, as gods. Or maybe I didn't mention that, but gods also have a dharma to follow. And they're part of it. So it's, as I said, if it's beyond, when I say it's beyond, it's ultimate, yeah, it's truly ultimate. Even the gods are subject to it. The gods are not in control of it. Okay. So when, for example, in Hinduism, when the universe ultimately billions and billions of years in the future collapses and disintegrates and dissolves, okay, the gods kind of go into a restful mode. They go to sleep. It happens to the gods as well. Are not destroyed, because as I told you, the gods never really die. But they go into a sleep for a while. There's a period of stasis and, well, you could say peace, but whatever. It's more like stasis. Nothing's going on. And then after a really long time, again, billions and billions of years, it's almost like everything starts waking up again. Even the gods. The gods wake up and start being active again. And it all starts all over again for another however many billions of cycles or trillions of cycles until it all comes to a halt again. And so even the gods are subject to that. Not so in other religions. We have religions like Judaism and Christianity and Islam. The gods of those religions, no, God is in control of it. He is the ultimate reality. The gods of those religions. He's not subject to whether the world ends and restarts, whatever. God's not subject to that. He does that. Okay? So for the reality, this ultimate reality in some religions encompasses even what we might think it might not encompass, like divine beings. All right, well, I can get back to the sacred next week. I can come to the sacred next week. I'll end here. God bless you all. Have a good weekend. Have a good day, sir. Have a good day, miss.